My in-laws kept ordering expensive cocktails, so I left before the bill came. The text arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dinner this Saturday? We'd love to have you join us. 5 years of marriage to Daniel, and this was the first time his parents had directly invited me anywhere without him initiating. I stared at my phone, a strange, hollow feeling forming in my stomach. "They're trying, Emma," Daniel said later that evening, his eyes bright with hope as he loosened his tie. "Mom specifically mentioned she wants you there." I didn't have the heart to remind him that his mother, Eleanor, had specifically mentioned wanting me at family events before, only to seat me at the far end of the table, or interrupt me whenever I spoke, or accidentally exclude me from family photos. "The Hawthorne at 8, I murmured, referring to the 5-star restaurant his parents had chosen. "Isn't that a bit excessive for a casual family dinner?" Daniel shrugged. "They're celebrating Dad's new client. You know how they are." Yes, I knew exactly how they were. Howard and Eleanor Martin, the power couple of local real estate, with their matching Mercedes and vacation home in Napa Valley. They'd been clear from day one that their son, Harvard Law, tennis champion, heir to their boutique real estate empire, could have done better than me, a graphic designer from a middle-class family with student loans still hanging around my neck. "It'll be different this time," Daniel insisted. "Mom said it's a symbolic gesture. A new chapter." I wanted to believe him. For 5 years, I'd orchestrated birthday parties they never thanked me for, bought gifts they re-gifted or returned. When Eleanor broke her ankle, I'd cooked meals for them every day for 2 weeks. And 6 months ago, when their boutique business hit a rough patch, I dipped into my personal savings to loan them $10,000, money they'd yet to mention repaying. All of it met with the same lukewarm politeness that never quite reached their eyes. "I'll pick you up a new dress this weekend," Daniel offered. "No need," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'll handle it." By Friday, I found myself standing in a department store dressing room, examining my reflection in a navy blue cocktail dress that cost more than I normally spend on a month's worth of clothes. "Is it for a special occasion?" the saleswoman asked. "Family dinner," I replied, and hearing it aloud made me realize how absurd it was to spend $300 on a dress just to impress people who had never shown any genuine interest in knowing me. That night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside me, a thought occurred to me. I could pay for dinner. All of it. Maybe that would finally earn their respect, showing them I wasn't the financial burden they believed me to be. Saturday evening arrived with the crisp anticipation of early autumn. As we pulled up to the Hawthorne's valet, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You look beautiful," he said. "They're going to love you." After 5 years, I knew better, but I squeezed back anyway. "I thought I'd pick up the check tonight," I said casually, "as a thank you for inviting us." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "That's not necessary, Em. Dad will." "I want to," I insisted. "Please don't mention it until the bill comes." The Hawthorne was everything I'd expected: crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waitstaff hovering like elegant shadows. Howard and Eleanor were already seated when we arrived, immaculately dressed as always. Eleanor's diamond earrings caught the light as she stood to greet us, her smile tight at the corners. "Emma," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "That dress is interesting." Howard shook my hand firmly. "Glad you could join us," he said, sounding more like he was conducting a business meeting than greeting family. A waiter appeared at Eleanor's elbow. "Would you care to start with drinks?" She didn't even glance at the menu. "2 millionaire's martinis," she said, nodding toward Howard. "And you, Daniel?" "Just sparkling water for now," my husband replied. All eyes turned to me. I hesitated, then smiled. "Sparkling water for me as well, please." Eleanor's lips pursed slightly. "Oh, come now, Emma. We're celebrating. Live a little." I felt Daniel's foot nudge mine under the table. "Maybe a glass of house white?" I amended. Eleanor laughed, the sound like glass breaking. "House white? At the Hawthorne? Oh dear." She turned to the waiter. "She'll have the signature champagne cocktail." The waiter nodded and disappeared, leaving me with the distinct feeling that I'd just lost the first round of a game I hadn't agreed to play. As I glanced at the small leather-bound drink menu, I glimpsed the prices, and my stomach tightened. The Millionaire's Martini was $32 each. So, Emma, Eleanor said suddenly, how's the drawing business going? Still making those little logos? It's graphic design, Mother, Daniel corrected gently. And Emma just landed the Blue Ridge account. It's a big deal. Oh, I don't think I've heard of them, she replied, though the Blue Ridge hotel chain was one of the largest in the country. The drinks arrived, Eleanor's and Howard's martinis presented with a flourish, thin gold flakes floating on the surface. Howard lifted his glass. To family, he said, his voice carrying just enough to turn heads at nearby tables. To family, we echoed, the word hollow in my mouth. And to finally seeing eye to eye, Eleanor added, her gaze fixing on me with an intensity that made me uneasy. We clinked glasses. As we set them down, Eleanor immediately caught the waiter's attention. We'll have another round, she said, without consulting anyone. The second round of drinks arrived before we'd even ordered food. Then a third appeared almost immediately after. By the time we finally ordered our entrees, the table was crowded with empty glasses. You know, Emma, Howard said, swirling his fourth drink, I've always admired people with your background. I blinked. My background? Middle America. Salt of the earth. Must have been so simple growing up that way. No pressure. No expectations. He smiled broadly, as if he'd paid me a compliment. As they continued, trading veiled insults masked as observations about my upbringing, my career, even the way I held my fork, a coldness settled in my chest. This wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't a new chapter. It was a performance. And as I watched them order the most expensive items on the menu with casual indifference, I finally understood what this dinner was really about. I'd offered to pay, and somehow they'd found out. This wasn't about accepting me into their family. It was about putting me in my place. Another round, Eleanor announced, raising her empty martini glass before I'd even taken 3 sips of my champagne cocktail. The waiter materialized instantly, as if summoned by some invisible signal only the wealthy could emit. Daniel shot me a concerned glance. Mom, maybe we should order food first? Nonsense, Howard replied, loosening his Italian silk tie. The night is young. And Emma's buying, right? He winked at me, confirming my suspicions. Daniel had told them. My champagne suddenly tasted bitter. I forced a smile, trying to maintain composure as the knot in my stomach tightened. Of course. Order whatever you'd like. Eleanor smirked, her perfectly lined lips curling upward. How generous. Daniel, you've found yourself quite the provider. The waiter returned with another round of Millionaire's martinis for them, each glass rimmed with gold dust. I calculated quickly. We were already over $200 in drinks alone, and we hadn't even seen menus yet. A toast, Howard declared, raising his glass high enough that diners at nearby tables turned to look. To family, we echoed. The word felt hollow on my tongue. And to success, Eleanor added, her eyes never leaving mine as she sipped. To those who earn it and those who marry into it. Daniel laughed uncomfortably. Mother, please. What? It's a compliment, she insisted, though her eyes remained cold. Not everyone can build something from nothing like we did. Some people's talents are more decorative. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. My design career was more than decorative. I'd worked with major brands, won awards. But this wasn't about facts. It was about establishing dominance. Speaking of decorative, Howard interjected, swirling his martini. That little apartment you two live in. When are you going to let us help you move somewhere more suitable for Martin? Before I could respond, Eleanor chimed in. We've always said we'd help with the down payment on a proper home. No son of ours should be living in a rental. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Our apartment is perfectly fine, Mom. We're saving up. Saving? Howard laughed. At your age, I already owned 3 properties. Different times, Dad, Daniel replied. No, different priorities, Eleanor corrected, eyeing me. When a man marries the right kind of woman, doors open. The waiter appeared with menus, providing momentary relief from their verbal jabs. As I scanned the prices, my bank account seemed to shrink with each item I read. Entrees started at $75. Howard didn't bother looking at his menu. "I'll have the Wagyu tomahawk, rare. And another martini." Eleanor followed suit. "The lobster thermidor. And we'll start with the seafood tower for the table." I checked the price. $195 for the tower alone. "Oh, and a bottle of the 2005 Chateau Margaux," Howard added. "Perfect with the beef." The waiter nodded appreciatively. "Excellent choice, sir." I recognized the wine name from an article I'd read. It cost upwards of $800 per bottle. My monthly mortgage payment poured into glasses. As the waiter departed, Eleanor raised her glass again. "To shared success," she proclaimed loudly. The ritual repeated, glasses clinked, empty words exchanged. But this time, Eleanor didn't stop there. "You know, Emma, I was just like you once," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Oh," I managed, dreading what would follow. "Yes, ambitious but untutored, rough around the edges." She adjusted her diamond bracelet, making sure I noticed it. "Howard's mother took me under her wing. Taught me everything. How to dress, which fork to use, how to behave in proper society." "I don't recall asking for lessons," I replied, surprising myself with my directness. Eleanor blinked, momentarily thrown off script. "Well, some of us recognize when we need help. Your background doesn't exactly prepare one for certain circles." The seafood tower arrived, an elaborate display of ice and shellfish. Howard immediately grabbed the largest lobster claw, cracking it with gusto. "Emma's parents are lovely people," Daniel interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. "Of course they are," Howard agreed, butter dripping down his chin. "Salt of the earth. Your father's a plumber. Isn't he, Emma?" "An engineering contractor," I corrected. "He owns his company." An entrepreneur," Howard exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Just like us, then." The wine arrived, and Howard made a show of tasting it, swirling and sniffing like he was performing for an audience. "Acceptable," he finally pronounced, and the waiter poured for glasses. Eleanor lifted hers immediately. "To finally seeing eye to eye," she announced, staring directly at me. I raised my glass mechanically, the meaning behind her words becoming clearer with each toast. This wasn't celebration, it was mockery disguised as inclusion. "You know," Howard said between bites of overpriced seafood, "I always told Daniel he should marry Caroline Witherspoon. Her father and I were golf buddies. She's running her own hedge fund now." Daniel tensed beside me. "Dad, that's enough." "What?" "Just making conversation," Howard replied innocently. "Emma doesn't mind, do you, dear? We're all family here." The main courses arrived just as they finished the bottle of wine. Howard promptly ordered another, this time a different vintage that the waiter described as even more exclusive. "Emma's treat," Eleanor reminded the waiter with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As they ate, they continued their performance, complimenting my simple charm while simultaneously undermining everything about me. My career became cute little drawings. My education at a state university was adorably practical, and my fashion sense was refreshingly unsophisticated. Each barb was carefully crafted to seem like a compliment to outside ears. To anyone overhearing, they might sound like doting in-laws. But the subtext was crystal clear. I didn't belong. "Another toast," Howard declared, raising his third glass from the second wine bottle. "To ambition." I raised my glass mechanically, catching my reflection in the restaurant's mirrored wall. I looked small, diminished, exactly how they wanted me to feel. It was then that I saw them for what they truly were, not sophisticated elites, but bullies using wealth as a weapon. People so insecure they needed to belittle others to feel powerful. The realization should have hurt, but instead, I felt strangely liberated. The fog of seeking their approval lifted, and for the first time since meeting them, I saw with perfect clarity. I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't want it, and I certainly wasn't going to pay for it anymore. Would anyone care for dessert? The waiter appeared just as Howard finished the last of his second $800 wine bottle. His cheeks had reddened from the alcohol, but his calculating eyes remained sharp. "We'll take one of each," Eleanor declared without consulting the menu. "Emma's feeling generous tonight." I glanced at Daniel, hoping for some intervention, but he was scrolling through emails on his phone, having mentally checked out of the uncomfortable situation an hour ago. 5 years of marriage, and he still couldn't, or wouldn't, stand up to his parents on my behalf. "Actually," I said quietly, "perhaps just coffee for me." Eleanor laughed as if I'd told a charming joke. "Oh, Emma, don't be silly. The chocolate soufflé here is divine. And the creme brulee is flown in from a pâtisserie in Paris every morning." "Paris?" I echoed, imagining dollar signs multiplying. "Yes, dear. The chef trained under Pierre Hermé himself." She turned to the waiter. "We'll take the full dessert selection and 4 espressos. And perhaps a dessert wine? Something special." The waiter nodded. The Chateau d'Yquem 1990 would pair beautifully. "Perfect," Howard agreed before I could object. My throat tightened. I'd researched the Hawthorne before coming, but even my highest estimate was being rapidly outpaced. This wasn't just taking advantage, it was deliberate financial sabotage. As the waiter walked away, Howard's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and excused himself, leaving Eleanor, Daniel, and me in uncomfortable silence. "So," Eleanor said, her voice syrupy sweet, "tell me about this little loan you gave us, Emma. Daniel mentioned you were quite eager to help." I blinked, surprised she'd brought it up. "It wasn't a big deal. You needed it for the business, and family helps family." "Family helps family," she repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar phrase. "How quaint. And now you're helping again tonight." Before I could respond, Howard returned, looking pleased. "That was the Brightons. They're considering listing their Beacon Hill property with us. 7 million, at least." "Wonderful news," Eleanor cooed. "We should celebrate." "More champagne," Howard suggested, already looking for the waiter. I felt dizzy. The evening had become a bizarre financial hazing ritual designed to push me until I broke. The desserts arrived, 7 elaborate creations, each more extravagant than the last. The dessert wine followed, amber liquid in crystal glasses that probably cost more than my first car. "A toast," Howard announced, raising his glass. "To prosperity." I raised my glass mechanically, feeling nothing but contempt for their shallow performance. Daniel followed suit, seemingly oblivious to what was really happening. You simply must try this soufflé," Eleanor insisted, pushing a plate toward me. "It's worth every penny." I took a small bite, tasting nothing but bitterness. Howard checked his watch. "Well, it's getting late. I have an early tea time tomorrow." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, we should wrap this up." The waiter appeared as if summoned by their thoughts, a leather folder in hand. "Will this be one check or separate bills?" "One check," Howard said confidently. "Our daughter-in-law is treating tonight." The waiter placed the folder directly in front of me. I stared at the closed leather cover, my heart pounding. This was the moment they'd been building toward all night, my financial humiliation. With trembling fingers, I opened the folder. $3,475.82. The number seemed to pulse on the page. $3,475.82. More than my monthly mortgage payment. More than I'd budgeted for renovating my home office. Nearly half what I'd put aside for emergencies. I looked up to find all 3 of them watching me with different expressions. Eleanor's smug satisfaction, Howard's feigned indifference, and Daniel's oblivious hope that the evening had gone well. "Is everything all right, dear?" Eleanor asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's not too much, is it? You did offer to pay." Something inside me, something that had been bending for 5 years, finally snapped. "Excuse me," I said quietly, closing the folder. "I need to use the restroom." I stood up, taking my purse, but leaving the bill folder on the table. Daniel nodded absently, already engaged in conversation with his father about some client. In the hallway leading to the restrooms, I paused. To my right, the ladies' room door beckoned, the expected path. To my left, just 15 steps away, was the exit to the restaurant. 5 years of trying to please these people. 5 years of gifts, cooking, lending money, swallowing insults. 5 years of Daniel never quite standing up for me. And tonight, the ultimate test, to see if I would bankrupt myself to earn their approval. I took a deep breath, turned left, and walked straight toward the exit. The cool night air hit my face like a revelation. Freedom. I quickened my pace, moving past the valet stand and onto the sidewalk. My phone buzzed in my purse, probably Daniel wondering where I was, but I ignored it. I walked 2 blocks before hailing a cab, giving the driver my address. As we pulled away, I imagined the scene unfolding back at the Hawthorne. Daniel returning from the men's room, asking where I was. Eleanor checking her watch impatiently. Howard making some cutting remark about my absence. The waiter hovering, waiting for payment. The growing realization that I wasn't coming back. The thought should have filled me with anxiety, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The burden of seeking their approval had been lifted. I'd spent so long trying to belong to a family that never wanted me, I'd forgotten how to belong to myself. The cab pulled up to Daniel's and my apartment building. I paid the driver and walked inside, ignoring the continuing buzzing from my phone. In our bedroom, I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of the bed, finally checking my messages. 15 texts from Daniel, growing increasingly frantic. Where are you? Are you okay? Did you leave? Mom and Dad are furious. The bill is over $3,000. Emma, where are you? 7 missed calls. I turned off my phone, changed into comfortable clothes, and made myself a cup of tea. For the first time in years, I didn't care what the Martins thought of me. I didn't care if they were angry. I didn't care about the fallout that would inevitably come. I had walked away from more than a dinner bill tonight. I had walked away from the idea that I needed their validation to be worthy. And it felt better than any overpriced dessert ever could. 3 days passed. My phone remained off. The apartment felt eerily quiet without Daniel, who had yet to return home after that night at the Hawthorne. I supposed he was staying with his parents, plotting their next move, while I enjoyed my unexpected peace. On the 4th morning, I finally powered on my phone. It immediately erupted with notification sounds, 47 missed calls, 93 text messages, and 26 voicemails. Most were from Daniel. I had to pay the bill with Dad's card. He's furious. Please just call me. We need to talk. My parents think you planned this all along. This isn't like you, Emma. Are you coming home tonight? I don't understand what happened. His messages grew increasingly desperate as the days passed, but not once did he acknowledge what his parents had done. Not once did he question their behavior. The rest were from Eleanor and Howard, threats veiled as concern, demands disguised as invitations to talk things through. Howard's last message was particularly telling. This little tantrum is beneath you. We expect an apology at Sunday brunch. They expected an apology. From me. I deleted every message without responding and brewed myself coffee. My laptop pinged with a new email, my boss approving my request to work remotely for the week. I had fabricated a family emergency, which wasn't entirely untrue. My marriage was certainly in emergency status. The doorbell rang around noon. I peered through the peephole to see Daniel, his normally neat appearance disheveled. The sight of him, looking lost on his own doorstep, almost broke my resolve. Almost. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. Yes. His eyes widened at my cold tone. Emma, what's going on? I've been worried sick. Have you? I asked, genuinely curious if he'd spent even a moment considering my perspective. Of course I have. You disappeared in the middle of dinner, left my parents with a massive bill, and haven't answered your phone for days. There it was. His primary concern was the embarrassment I'd caused his parents, not why I might have felt driven to such an extreme action. Did you ever stop to think about why I left? I asked. He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. I assume my parents said something that upset you. But Emma, that's just how they are. You know that. And that's the problem. I replied quietly. That's exactly the problem. I stepped aside to let him in. He walked to our living room, still talking about how shocked his parents were, how uncomfortable it had been to cover the bill, how they couldn't understand my overreaction. I let him ramble, watching him with new eyes. This man, whom I had loved for 6 years, married for 5, couldn't see what was directly in front of him. "Are you even listening?" he demanded when I didn't respond. "I heard every word," I said. "Just like I heard every insult, every backhanded compliment, and every veiled threat your parents have made for 5 years. The difference is, I'm not ignoring it anymore." Daniel stared at me as if I'd started speaking a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" "They invited you to dinner." "They invited me to a public humiliation," I corrected. "They deliberately ordered the most expensive items, knowing I'd offered to pay." "That's just how they celebrate," he argued weakly. "They've always been extravagant." "No, Daniel. They've always been manipulative. And you've always enabled them." His face flushed. "That's not fair." "Neither was asking me to loan them $10,000 that they've never mentioned repaying," I countered. "Neither was letting them mock my career, my family, and my background for years while you sat by saying nothing." "They're my parents," he said, as if that explained everything. "And I'm your wife," I replied. Or at least I thought I was. We stared at each other across the living room, the distance between us suddenly seeming insurmountable. "Mom wants you to come to brunch on Sunday," he finally said, "to talk things through." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I'm not going to brunch. I'm not going to any more family events. I'm done, Daniel." "Done with my family?" he asked, looking genuinely confused. "Done trying to earn their approval. Done watching you choose them over me. Done pretending we're one big, happy family when they've made it clear I'll never belong." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a text from his mother, then quickly put it away. "They're waiting to hear what you say," I guessed. "Whether you've managed to bring me back in line." His silence confirmed my suspicion. "Tell them I said no," I instructed. "No to brunch. No to their manipulative games. No to everything. Emma, please." "No, Daniel. For once in our marriage, I need you to respect my decision." He left shortly after, promising to figure something out. I changed the locks that afternoon. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically extracted myself from the Martin sphere of influence. I left the family group chats. I declined Eleanor's passive-aggressive dinner invitations. I ignored Howard's increasingly hostile emails demanding we act like adults. Daniel continued his campaign to bring me back into the fold, alternating between guilt trips and heartfelt pleas. "They miss you," he claimed once, so transparently false that I laughed in his face. "They miss having someone to belittle," I corrected. "They miss having financial support with no strings attached. They don't miss me." The silence I maintained was more powerful than any argument. Each invitation ignored, each message unanswered, each family event skipped was a statement louder than words. I was rewriting the terms of our relationship, or rather, ending it entirely. My absence created ripples I hadn't anticipated. Mutual friends called, confused about why I wasn't at the Martins' annual garden party. Daniel's sister, the only Martin who had ever shown me genuine kindness, sent a text saying simply, "Good for you." I focused on myself instead, taking on new design clients, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, and rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned in my quest to please the Martins. Daniel grew, increasingly desperate. "They're talking about writing you out of the will," he warned, as if that were a threat rather than a relief. "Good," I replied. "I don't want anything from them." "What about us?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What about our marriage?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw for the first time how much of himself he had sacrificed to please his parents. He was as much their victim as I was, though he couldn't see it. "Our marriage ended the moment you chose their approval over my dignity," I said gently. "I just didn't realize it until now." My phone rang as Daniel was leaving. Howard's name flashed on the screen, the first direct call since that night at the Hawthorne. I declined it without hesitation, the gesture more satisfying than any shouting match could have been. My silence spoke volumes, and for once, the Martins were the ones left scrambling for a response. 3 weeks after my restaurant walkout, I'd settled into a peaceful routine. I'd moved most of my belongings to a furnished short-term rental across town, filed preliminary divorce papers, and thrown myself into work. My design agency had just landed a major hotel chain account. Ironically, the very client Howard had dismissed as insignificant at that fateful dinner. My phone rang during an afternoon design session. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I almost declined it out of habit, but something made me hesitate. This was the first time he'd called in 5 days, after I'd made it clear I wouldn't be manipulated back into the Martin fold. "Hello." I answered cautiously.
Emma.
His voice sounded different, strained, desperate. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but please just listen." I said nothing, waiting. "It's my parents," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "The business is in trouble. Serious trouble." I almost laughed at the irony. "And this concerns me how?" "Please, Emma. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important." He took a deep breath. Prescott Investments pulled out. All their backing, gone overnight. Prescott Investments, the major investor the Martins had been courting for months. The one Howard had boasted about securing over countless family dinners. What happened? I asked, professional curiosity overriding my personal boundaries. Dad misrepresented some numbers, exaggerated a few properties' values. Prescott did a surprise audit and found discrepancies. He paused. "They're not just pulling their investment, they're filing a complaint with the Real Estate Commission." "That sounds like a Howard and Eleanor problem," I said, my voice deliberately neutral. "Not a me problem. Mom and Dad are going to lose everything, Emma. The business, their house, their reputation, everything." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered Eleanor's smug face as she ordered another $800 bottle of wine on my tab. "Again, Daniel. How is this my concern?" He was quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "They need money," he finally said.
Fast.
"To settle with Prescott before this goes public." Now I did laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. "You cannot be serious." "Emma, please."
Just talk to them.
"Hear them out. The last time I sat down with your parents, they tried to humiliate me and stick me with a $3,500 dinner bill." "They know they made a mistake," Daniel insisted. "They're desperate, Emma. They're actually scared." Howard and Eleanor Martin, scared. The concept was so foreign I couldn't quite picture it. "How much do they need?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. His answer made me gasp. $250,000. "Are you out of your mind? I don't have that kind of money." "But your parents do," he said quietly. "Your dad's contracting business is doing well. You could ask." "Stop." My voice turned to ice. "You want me to ask my father, the simple man your parents have mocked for years, to bail them out? They're family, Emma." "No, Daniel. They made it very clear I was never family. I was just a convenient wallet." The line went quiet again. Then, surprisingly, he said, "You're right." "What?" "You're right about them. About everything." His voice sounded hollow, defeated. "I've been making excuses for them my entire life. Watching them tear down everyone who didn't meet their standards. Including you." He exhaled shakily. "Especially you." I remained silent, not trusting this sudden epiphany. "The worst part is," he continued, "they've been lying about the business for years. All that bragging, all that superiority, it was built on fraud and debt." A strange feeling washed over me. Not quite satisfaction, not quite pity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they want to see you, to ask for your help personally." I laughed again. "Let me get this straight. After 5 years of treating me like an outsider, after deliberately trying to bankrupt me at that dinner, they want me to swoop in and save them." "Yes," he admitted. "They're staying at my place now. They had to move out of their house last week." The image of Howard and Eleanor cramped in Daniel's spare bedroom almost made me smile. "Almost. Dad asked me to call you first. To prepare you." Daniel hesitated. "He's calling me every 5 minutes to see if you've agreed to meet them." I thought of all the times I'd called Daniel, desperate for support against his parents' subtle cruelty, only to be told I was overreacting. All the times I'd needed him to stand up for me, and he'd chosen their comfort over mine. Tell them I'll think about it, I said finally. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment, turning this development over in my mind. The mighty Martins, brought low by their own hubris. Howard, who'd mocked my father's little contracting business, now needed my family's money to avoid disgrace. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. They're asking if tomorrow works for you. Any time, any place. The ball was in my court now. After years of playing by their rules, dancing to their tune, I held all the power. They needed me far more than I had ever needed them. I texted back a time and a location, a modest coffee shop near my office, not the type of place the Martins would normally deign to enter. Then I called my lawyer. I need advice on something unusual, I explained, outlining the situation. You're not seriously considering giving them money? She asked incredulously. No, I replied, but I am considering hearing them out. I want to know my options. After our call, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would be the reckoning I never thought would come. The tables had turned so completely, it was almost dizzying. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I received another text, this one from Eleanor herself, the first direct communication since the restaurant incident. We're truly desperate, Emma. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option. Howard has had 2 panic attacks this week. Please help us. 5 years ago, such a vulnerable message from my mother-in-law would have sent me rushing to her aid, eager to finally earn her approval. Now, I read it dispassionately, recognizing the manipulation tactics even in her moment of genuine crisis.
I didn't respond.
Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them feel, for once, what it was like to be at someone else's mercy. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something crucial. I no longer cared whether the Martins approved of me. Their opinion had lost all value, and that realization was worth far more than any amount they might beg for tomorrow. I arrived at Rosie's Cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. The modest coffee shop, with its mismatched furniture and local artwork, was worlds away from the Hawthorne's crystal and white tablecloths. I ordered a simple black coffee and waited. They arrived exactly on time, a small mercy, as punctuality had always been Howard's obsession. But these weren't the Martins I remembered. Eleanor's designer clothes had been replaced by a plain blouse and slacks. Her signature diamond earrings were noticeably absent. Howard's confident stride had diminished to an uncertain shuffle, his normally immaculate hair showing strands of gray I'd never noticed before. Daniel trailed behind them, looking trapped between worlds. He caught my eye and gave a small, uncertain nod before guiding his parents to my table. Emma, Eleanor said, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. Thank you for meeting us. I gestured to the empty chairs. Please sit. Howard cleared his throat. Should we order first? If you'd like, I replied coolly. They approached the counter hesitantly, examining the menu board with visible confusion. I watched Eleanor flinch slightly at the prices, not because they were high, but because for the first time in decades, she needed to consider the cost of a simple coffee. When they returned with their drinks, the silence was deafening. Howard fidgeted with his paper cup, looking everywhere but at me. Eleanor's perfectly manicured nails, the one luxury she'd apparently maintained, tapped nervously on the table. Well, I said finally, I understand you wanted to talk. Howard nodded, his face flushing slightly. Emma, He stopped, seemingly unable to form the words. We need your help. Eleanor finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. Our business is in trouble. So I've heard, I replied neutrally. Howard leaned forward. It's more than trouble. It's catastrophic. Prescott Investments is threatening legal action unless we can repay what they've invested, plus damages. And why would they do that? I asked, though Daniel had already told me. Howard's shoulders slumped. I may have exaggerated some of our property valuations. Inflated a few numbers to secure their backing. You committed fraud, I clarified. He winced at the word. It was just business. Everyone does it. Clearly not everyone, I noted, or you wouldn't be in this position. Eleanor reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. Emma, we know we've treated you poorly. Her voice wavered. We were wrong about you. 5 years of backhanded compliments, snide remarks, and deliberate exclusion flashed through my mind. Wrong about me how, exactly? We thought you were after Daniel's money, she admitted, her eyes downcast. We thought you weren't good enough for our son. And now, I prompted. Now we know better, Howard interjected. You've built a successful career while our business was built on lies. You have integrity. We don't. Their humility seemed genuine, but it came too late. 5 years too late. What exactly do you want from me? I asked, though I already knew. Howard took a deep breath. We need a loan. Enough to settle with Prescott and avoid criminal charges. $250,000, I stated flatly. They both nodded, looking miserable. And what collateral are you offering? Howard blinked, caught off guard by the businesslike question. Well, we don't exactly have any assets left. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars are leased. So, you want me to give you $250,000 with no guarantee of repayment? We would repay you, Eleanor insisted. As soon as we get back on our feet. The way you repaid the $10,000 I loaned you 6 months ago? I asked pointedly. They had the grace to look ashamed. Daniel, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Emma, I know this is a lot to ask, but they're desperate. They have nowhere else to turn. I looked at each of their faces. Howard's forced humility, Eleanor's calculated desperation, Daniel's genuine conflict. For a brief moment, I considered helping them. Not for their sake, but for Daniel's, who was caught in the middle of a mess his parents had created. Then I remembered Eleanor's words at that disastrous dinner. To those who earn it, and those who marry into it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the table between us. They all stared at it, confused. Do you know what this is? I asked quietly. Howard squinted at it. Is that the dinner bill from the Hawthorne? Yes, I confirmed. $3,475.82. I kept it as a reminder. A reminder of what? Eleanor asked. Of your true colors. I smoothed out the creased paper. You invited me to dinner, knowing I'd offered to pay, and deliberately ordered the most expensive items on the menu. You mocked my background, my career, my very existence while drinking $800 bottles of wine on my tab. They didn't deny it. They couldn't. You never saw me as family, I continued. I was just a convenient wallet. Someone to bail you out when needed, then be put back in my place afterwards. That's not true, Howard protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. Because here you are again, treating me exactly the same way. The only difference is the amount has increased from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Whether they were genuine or another manipulation tactic, I couldn't tell anymore. We've changed, Emma. This crisis has opened our eyes. I smiled sadly. No, Eleanor. You haven't changed. You're just desperate. I took the bill and slid it across the table toward them. You drank my last ounce of patience that night. I won't be footing another one of your tabs, financially or emotionally. Howard's face reddened. After everything you've what? I cut him off. Insulted me? Belittled me? Made me feel worthless? Is that what you were going to say? The cafe had gone quiet, other patrons pretending not to listen to our conversation. Emma, please, Daniel begged. They could go to prison. I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, and saw him clearly for the first time. A man trapped between duty to his parents and loyalty to his wife, never quite choosing either completely. That's not my problem, Daniel, I said gently. It never was. I stood up, gathering my purse and jacket. I filed for divorce last week. The papers should arrive tomorrow. Eleanor gasped. Howard's mouth opened and closed without sound. Daniel just looked defeated. For what it's worth, I added, I did love you, Daniel. But I've learned that love without respect isn't enough. Howard found his voice. So that's it? After everything, you're just walking away? The irony of his question, echoing exactly what I'd done at the Hawthorne, wasn't lost on me. Yes, I replied simply. I am. And this time, you all know I'm not coming back. As I turned to leave, Eleanor called after me, her voice breaking. What are we supposed to do now? I paused at the door, looking back at the broken family I'd once desperately wanted to join. You should try earning your way back. I hear it builds character. Walking out of that cafe, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just a profound sense of freedom. The Martins would find another solution, or they wouldn't. Daniel would choose his path, with or without them. But I had finally chosen mine. And for the first time in years, I was walking it alone, head held high, never looking back. Sometimes karma tastes better than the most expensive wine.